Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. I am Vilma Lisboska and I am the creator of the 360 Self Love Podcast. I would love to start our first episode by quickly sharing why I decided to create this podcast and why I decided to name it 360 Self Love. I will also share about my personal journey with learning to love and connect with myself. If you are part of my community or you've been part of my community for a while, you have already heard all about my self-love journey. In fact, I often talk about it in phases. So I've talked about my self-love journey phase 1, self-love journey phase 2, and currently I am in what I call my self-love journey phase 3. I created this podcast because I want to be able to share more long form content with you. I want to share stories and nuggets of wisdom that go beyond what you can find on my social media accounts or even my newsletters. I named this podcast 360 Self Love because what I will be sharing with you here is not going to be about the aspects of self love that our society acknowledges, such as predominantly taking care of our physical well being, but about other self-love pillars and the 360 degrees of well-being that allow us to embody unwavering self-love. My own life's journey has been about this theme. I've learned the hard way how to honor and connect with myself at a deeper level, a level that allows me to be exactly the kind of leader that you need me to be. Today, I'm going to just share quickly about phase 1. Phase 1 has essentially been the foundation of why I am where I am today. It was what I call my initiation into the wellness industry. But really, my story, just like your story, started in my childhood. One thing that I want to make sure I convey today is that nothing is by chance, and I don't mean it in the cliche way of everything happens for a reason, though I do believe that too. But what I'm talking about is more if we allow ourselves to really pay attention to our lives, learning from every phase and every experience, we begin to see that we are being shaped into our purpose. Every challenge, every painful experience becomes part of the gift we're here to offer, the very medicine we once needed ourselves. I believe that firmly. I believe that for myself, and I believe that for you. I am here today doing what I'm doing because of the experiences I had as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, and now as a more mature version of myself. But essentially, everything that we experience has a beautiful lesson. And for me, while that started much earlier, before that phase 1, that chapter of my life was truly my initiation because that is where I awakened. Now, before I go into sharing this part of my story, I want to quickly mention that what I'll be sharing is a personal experience related to anxiety. So, this may feel triggering. Please feel free to pause or skip if you need to. And just know that you are safe and that there is hope on the other side of the story. So, at age 23, I had one of the most impactful experiences of my life. I was living in Miami one day while in the car on my way to Key West with a guy I was dating at the time. I suddenly began to feel strange. Something just came over me and I felt highly overwhelmed to the point where I was experiencing disassociation. I felt detached from my body, from reality. I was experiencing for the first time a panic attack because I didn't know what was happening, and the person I was with also didn't know what was happening. We didn't know how to take me safely from point A to point B, meaning from dysregulation to regulation. So I stayed in that state of panic for over 2 hours. And when I talk about panic, I am talking about leaving my body, not being able to think, feeling like I was losing my mind, like I was going to die, and almost feeling paralyzed, not in control of my body to the extent that I was shaking and my muscles were twitching for literally over 2 hours nonstop. I felt so sick to my stomach. I thought I had food poisoning. It was the scariest thing I had experienced thus far in my life, especially when it came to my health. That moment changed everything for me. That day changed the course of my entire life, and it became the beginning of what I now call phase 1 of my self-love journey. Back then, nervous system regulation was not something that was being talked about. Meditation was something that only certain kind of people practice, but that wasn't necessarily something that you would reach for if you were experiencing what was considered a mental disorder. So, of course, I was prescribed for pharmaceuticals for my anxiety, which at the moment Personally, I chose not to consume because as a millennial, I had many friends who were at that moment addicted to pills, and I was a little too afraid of what it may do to me. I had already grown up in a household where addiction was a thing, and I knew that I may be potentially susceptible to becoming addicted. So I made the choice not to take any pills to help with my anxiety. And I want to clarify very quickly. I am not against medicine. I have had other moments of my life when I chose to take anxiety medication because I didn't have the tools or the resources that I now have. And I've also have had loved ones who have had to rely on medication, and it's helped them greatly. So by no means am I saying there is anything wrong with taking pharmaceuticals for anxiety or any other condition for that matter. You have to do what is right for you. Ultimately, at that moment of my life, I felt that despite what I was experiencing, I had the mental strength to make a different choice and recover on my own. Instead, I began to exercise. I began eating differently. I leaned onto God. I began taking care of my body and developing healthier habits and abandoning the lifestyle that had led to the panic attacks in the first place. Now, full disclosure, I was young and I was wild. I was drinking a lot and experimenting with drugs. I was unkind to my body and my health. I had no balance. And frankly, the way I was treating my body and my health was a reflection of my lack of love for myself. This is why this was the beginning of my self-love journey. The choices that I made at that moment were made out of love for myself, for my body, and for my well-being. My life and my health fell out of control. So I needed to take control. This was an integral part of my life because it was the beginning of learning to develop basic self-leadership skills such as discipline and strong decision making. I learned to bring structure and balance into my daily routine, incorporating healthier habits. Fitness helped me so much with the anxiety and the panic attacks. It also helped me develop discipline and strengthen my resilience. For me, phase one of my self-love journey was basically all about self-care, self-respect, consistency, discipline, resilience, structure, control. At times, that control and the structure felt intense. And you know what? That was exactly what I needed. Not in a punishing way, but as in a firm type of guidance. Because of how derailed I was before this new lifestyle, I had to create parameters, non-negotiables. I had to coach and essentially parent myself. So here's what I want to remind you of. You are exactly where you need to be, and the choices you may have to make to get to the next level of your health may require a different approach than what you're used to. You're going to have to get uncomfortable. What looks like extreme for some may actually be the right thing for you, but only if it's actually supporting you, not pushing you further away from yourself. Now, notice I said uncomfortable. Discomfort that propels our growth should not feel unsafe, and there's a difference. In that moment of my life, I was exactly where I needed to be. The choices I made to better myself, to better my health, to take charge of my life, even though they felt somewhat strict at the time, they were exactly what I needed because of the lack of structure and control I had over my life all up until that point. This was my way to take charge. That was self-love. It gave me direction. I felt safe within that container. It protected me from losing myself. There are moments when we just need to learn to tap into that strong masculine energy within us. The discipline, the structure, not because these only exist during certain seasons, but because the level at which we need them changes depending on where we are at any given moment. Softening alone is not always sufficient and may not always serve you depending on where you are in your life. If you feel unstable, needing to build a firm foundation, it can actually feel destabilizing and unsupportive. And if you tend to feel unsafe without a strong container, softening is not something you should force either. It's something you slowly build up to. We'll dive deeper into this on future episodes, but what I want to remind you of right now is that we all have that masculine and feminine energy within us, the yin, the yang. There are times to be strong and times to be soft. There are times to be disciplined and times to relax. There are times to act and times to rest. And there are times to give and times to receive. Swinging too far to one side of the pendulum isn't necessarily wrong. It may actually serve you depending on where you are in your life. But the work is in learning to recognize when it's supporting you and when it's pulling you out of alignment. Over time, you learn when to tap into each of these depending on your journey. It's a skill you build, and that's what creates true balance. There may be times in your life when you are perfectly balanced between your masculine and feminine energies, when you feel that level of precision while simultaneously feeling a sense of ease and flow. And there will be other times when you will lose that balance, and that is okay. That is when it becomes imperative that you connect with yourself to tune in into what you need. And once you build that skill, it becomes natural. You will know exactly how to incorporate more of the feminine energy or masculine qualities into your life to shift you back into balance when you need it. For many people, physical well-being is where their self-love journey begins. And if you are here, I want to encourage you to honor this phase. Perhaps you've been practicing more structure, discipline, and resilience. Maybe you've gotten used to creating boundaries or parameters to support yourself. And depending on where you are, it may have even required a bit of a more intense approach. And that's okay, it served you. It's part of what got you here. Now, this is where it gets tricky. What got you through phase 1 is not going to be what gets you to phase 2. That's what our next episode is going to be about. For some of you, especially the ones who know how to push, how to show up, how to do exactly what needs to be done, this is the moment where the shift begins. And at the same time, if you are someone who is still building that foundation, who is still learning how to show up for yourself, this is your reminder that structure and discipline are not the enemy. They are an act of self-respect, but they're only part of the equation. If you see yourself in this story, if you've learned how to show up even when it's hard, if you take pride in doing things well and finishing what you started, if there's a part of you that feels safe having a plan, a structure, something to follow, but maybe there are moments where it feels like a lot to hold, I want you to know that I see you. In our second episode, I will be sharing about phase 2 of my self-love journey. What ignited it? What I learned about myself that led me to question the patterns that I was following during that time of my life. The patterns that at that moment, 10 years into my self-love journey, had served me. That level of discipline, even when it felt rigid at times, wasn't wrong when I was 23 and needed to get my shit together. Again, it served me back then, but then I learned that at 33, it was no longer building me, but it was tearing me apart. So we will dive deeper into how to know whether the kind of discipline that's driving you is serving you or holding you back. This is really important for you to remember. What once served you may become limiting at a different time of your life. This is what evolution and growth is all about, in learning to recognize this. Before we part ways, I want to invite you to reflect. What does self-love look like for you right now? Maybe reflect on your current journey and what this phase is trying to teach you. I encourage you to journal it. I hope you enjoyed this first episode and the start of many. I am Vilma Lisbosque, and I'm wishing you a peaceful, creative, and joyful day. Until next time.